This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome to the PANORAMIC trial. So PANORAMIC stands for Platform Adaptive Trial of Novel Antivirals for Early Treatment of COVID-19 in the Community. The Chief Investigator is Professor Chris Butler. The trial is sponsored by the University of Oxford and funded by the Department of Health and Social Care and the NIHR. During this training session, we'll be looking at the trial design and management, site recruitment, setup and tracking, and also participant recruitment, inclusion and follow-up. During part 1, we'll look at the trial summary, design, the medication, target population, aim and objectives, and the overall management. So firstly, looking at the wider team. So the trial will be led by the University of Oxford Primary Care CTU, along with Oxford Respiratory CTU, who will be leading on the safety aspects of the trial. The lead CRN in England is the Thames Valley and South Midlands, and will also be working with Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. We have a couple of sub-studies, a virology sub-study and post-exposure prophylaxis sub-study run by the teams at UCL and Cardiff Centre for Trials Research. We'll also be working with the Antiviral Task Force and the Department of Health and Social Care, along with the universities listed here. The primary aim of the trial is to determine whether antiviral treatment in the community safely reduces the risk of hospitalisations and deaths in higher risk patients with confirmed COVID-19. PANORAMIC is a platform adaptive randomised clinical trial in community care, and this means it will operate under a master protocol that allows the addition or replacement of further interventions as and when new treatments become available. So we'll be looking at existing novel antiviral agents or combinations of agents specified by the Antiviral Task Force in comparison with best usual primary care. In the first instance, PANORAMIC will be looking at usual care compared to usual care plus molnupiravir. So a bit about the trial medication molnupiravir. So it's an oral antiviral treatment that was initially developed for treatment of influenza. It's been shown to have a good safety profile and improve recovery from COVID-19 symptoms and reduce the need for hospitalisation. It has a conditional licence, and this means that it has been licensed for use as a treatment based on less data than normally required. And to receive this licence, the data has shown that the benefits of the treatment outweigh the risks. So the aim of the PANORAMIC trial is to collect more data to confirm whether molnupiravir is an effective COVID-19 treatment. Molnupiravir has been highly recommended by the Antivirals Task Force for the treatment of COVID-19, and the use of this drug in the PANORAMIC trial has been approved by the MHRA. So looking at the dose and administration. So as molnupiravir is a new treatment for COVID, the most effective dose is still unknown. But for the PANORAMIC trial, we'll be asking participants to take 4 200mg capsules, so 800mg in total, orally twice a day for 5 days. Common side effects of the drug include dizziness, headaches, diarrhea and nausea, which will be closely monitored by the clinical team. So looking at the target population for the study, so we'll be looking for patients aged 50 and over with or without a comorbidity. We're also looking at patients aged 18 to 49 years and clinically vulnerable. And by this we mean that they have to have at least one of the medical conditions listed below, or be deemed clinically vulnerable by the recruiting clinician or research nurse for another reason. Potential participants must also have symptoms attributable to COVID-19, which started within the past 5 days and are still ongoing, as well as a positive PCR test taken between 2 days before symptom onset and randomisation. Patients with symptoms and a positive lateral flow test may also be eligible. However, inclusion in the main analysis will be dependent on a positive PCR test. So now looking at the exclusion criteria. So patients currently admitted to hospital, or if they've been previously randomised into the PANORAMIC trial, or if they're currently taking part in a clinical trial of a therapeutic agent for COVID-19. Additional exclusions will be specific to each intervention arm, and these will be listed in the intervention-specific appendices. So looking at the eligibility criteria specific to molnupiravir, so participants of childbearing potential must be willing to take a pregnancy test before starting the study drug. Specific exclusions include known or suspected pregnancy, breastfeeding, participants of childbearing potential or participants who have a partner with childbearing potential and are not willing to use highly effective contraception for the 28-day trial period. And methods of contraception that will be accepted on the trial will be relayed to the participant at screening, and you can also look in the ISA for more information on this. Participants with a known allergy to molnupiravir or if they're currently taking the drug will also be excluded. Moving on to objectives. So the primary objective will be to determine whether antiviral treatment in the community safely reduces non-elective hospitalizations and deaths in higher risk symptomatic patients with confirmed COVID-19. The outcome measure will be all-cause non-elective hospitalization and or death within 28 days of randomization. We'll also be looking at some other secondary objectives, and these include the following: time to recovery, duration of symptoms, symptoms reoccurrence, healthcare service use, participant reported household infection rate, symptoms and well-being at 3 and 6 months, and safety. So part 2 will be looking at site recruitment, setup and tracking. So participants will be recruited either via panoramic hubs or via the central team. And the table here outlines the differences between the recruitment procedures. So panoramic hubs will be made up of GP practices or federations set up as sites. So they'll require a contract in place and GCP training, and potential participants will be found by a database search. Central recruitment, so UK-wide access through the website, and this will be available to clinicians, NHS 111, care homes and patients themselves. Consent procedures will be person to person for both routes, and for hubs, the study clinician will confirm eligibility, whereas for central recruitment, we'll have a central eligibility check using the summary care record or information from the patient and the GP. Medication can be stored at hubs and issued to the patient by the study clinicians. Medication and study materials will be couried to patients' homes for patients recruited centrally. The hub will be responsible for doing any sampling needed for the virology sub-study, whereas for centrally recruited patients, this will all be done via self-testing. All follow-up will be done by the study team, either online, by telephone, trial partner, or routinely collected data extracts. So looking at the distribution and tracking of medication. So the IMP will be sent directly to participants from either panoramic hubs or an accredited central facility, and in this case it's a company called IPS. We may also send IMP from the primary care CTU in the future, and trial packs will be tracked via courier or by calls and text messages to participants. You can refer to the relevant ISA for more details on the distribution of each antiviral agent. The flow diagram here shows the IMP returns procedure. So if a participant informs us that they no longer wish to take their trial medication, the trial team will send a prepaid envelope to the participant for them to return their medication to the primary care CTU. So currently all medication returns will be coming back to us here at the CTU, and the IMP lead here will update the IMP reconciliation log. We'll also send a text message reminder to those participants who have withdrawn from IMP but not returned their medication. So for any participants that withdraw, it's important that you inform both the withdrawal and the IMP team leads so they can arrange the IMP return. So medication adherence. So medication adherence will be captured in the daily diaries or phone calls by the trial team. Accountability logs are kept by the distributor, and these will be centrally monitored by the primary care CTU on regular intervals. The clinical team will confirm receipt of the trial medication during the day 1 and 2 calls to participants, which we'll talk about a bit later on. And if we are unable to contact the patient or their study partner, we'll be able to confirm and log receipt of the trial medication by looking in their online daily diaries. The distributor will also send a daily report of IMP packs sent out to the CTU. And if you do have any issues with any trial packs from participants, then please inform the IMP team lead. Finally, we'll be looking at participant recruitment, inclusion and follow-up. So there are many different routes where we'll be signposting participants to the trial. So starting with NHS Digital, so they'll provide a daily list of patients who've had a positive COVID-19 test, and the trial team will then contact those patients and explain about the trial. All NHS facilities, so including testing centres, NHS walk-in or drive-through centres, will all signpost potentially eligible participants to the website or the trial team. We'll have targeted campaigns for vulnerable groups via media campaigns, national charities and social media. We'll also have national media campaigns to generate exposure of the trial and signpost participants. The Zoe COVID app, Healthwise Wales and Joint Venture Research, along with some other COVID-19 research studies, will also signpost to the trial. Clinicians in general will reach out to participants via regular database searches for patients who've had a positive COVID test. And EMIS Anywhere, which is a data extraction service for primary care data, will also reach out to potentially eligible participants and signpost them to the website. Finally, all health and social care professionals, so this includes NHS 111, test and trace, care home staff and pharmacy staff, they will all be directing potential participants to the trial website. So participant recruitment will be face-to-face as well as remote. Screening procedures, eligibility and consent. All participants, apart from those who lack capacity, will have a two-way discussion, either face-by-face or by telephone or video consultation from a medically qualified clinician or research nurse prior to randomisation. As with principal, participants are too unwell or unable to respond to surveys, they can identify a study partner who can assist them with answering any questions. So looking again at the difference between the recruitment procedures for panoramic hubs and central recruitment. So participants at panoramic hubs will be recruited via routine consultations and database searches. Potentially eligible participants will then be invited either by phone call or text invites, and an appropriately qualified clinician will be responsible for screening, consent and eligibility procedures. If the patient is eligible, they'll be automatically randomised to one of the trial arms, and the PI at each hub will provide trial oversight and inform the central team of any serious adverse events. For those participants recruited centrally, so they will be presented directly to the central trials team via the trial website or free phone number. Their screening, baseline and contact information and informed consent will be self-completed by the patient or completed during a phone call with the trial team. The medically qualified clinician or appropriately trained research nurse will then confirm eligibility, and if eligible, the participant will be randomised and a participant pack will be sent directly to the patient by IPS. So looking firstly at screening procedures. So as we said, this will be face-to-face as well as remotely via the website or the free phone number. Participants will have a two-way discussion with the appropriately trained central trial team or hub staff, and those that are feeling better will be ineligible and asked to consult back to the Panoramic website if they do develop symptoms in the future. Pregnancy screening will be for participants of childbearing potential who are required to confirm a negative pregnancy test prior to starting their first dose of molnupiravir, and they'll need to indicate their willingness to take the pregnancy test in the screening form. Participants recruited face-to-face at the hubs will be asked to take a pregnancy test as part of the initial screening visit, and the test will be supplied in the participant pack with the antiviral agent for those recruited centrally. The pregnancy test must be completed prior to starting any antiviral agent that requires a confirmation of a negative pregnancy test, and this will all be explained prior to randomisation. We'll also be confirming the pregnancy test results during the day 1 and day 2 calls and also in the online daily diaries. So informed consent. All consent forms will be completed online and paperless for this study. So prior to consent, there'll be written and summary versions of the PIS and informed consent form made available to the participants. We'll also have a pictorial PIS and summary, as well as perhaps a video, which will be available to those patients who prefer a more simplified version of the PIS. Participants will need to be given enough time to consider all of the information and ask any questions before deciding whether they'd like to take part. Those participants capable of giving informed consent will be asked to provide consent after a two-way discussion between a medically qualified clinician or research nurse and the participant. This will be either face-to-face or by phone prior to randomisation. And during the call, the risk and benefits of taking part and follow-up procedures will all be explained to the patient. Participants can download a printer copy of their consent form once they've completed it, and for those recruiting the hubs, a copy will be filed in the patient's notes. If the recruiting healthcare or social care professional deems that a patient lacks capacity to provide consents for themselves, it may be possible that a personal or professional legal representative can provide consent on their behalf. Eligibility will be assessed for consented participants by a medically qualified clinician or research nurse who's suitably trained and delegated this responsibility at either a panoramic hub, other NHS healthcare provider, or by the central team here. Eligibility can be assessed by listing medical history and relevant information from the participant, and the eligibility assessment processes are outlined in the intervention-specific appendix. Certain IMPs may require direct access to the participant's summary care record or via relevant information obtained from the participant's GP. So randomisation, eligible patients will be randomised to either usual care, which is standard NHS care independent of the trial, or to IMP, which is a novel antiviral agent included in the trial, and it may change over the course of the study as new treatments become available. Participants will be randomised to one study arm using equal allocation ratios corresponding to the number of eligible arms in the trial. They must be eligible for at least two arms, so usual care and at least one of the antiviral interventions. Stratification will be by age and vaccination status, and an automatic email will be sent to the IMP distributor, the participant and the central trial team. If participants don't have an email address, then the trial team will contact them to inform them of their treatment allocation. So participants randomised to the usual care group will receive an information booklet via email or post if they don't have an email address. And the trial team will contact them on day 2 to confirm the follow-up process and ask if they have any questions. Participants randomised to the intervention will be sent a participant pack, and this will contain the antiviral agent, an information booklet, a medication card detailing how to take the medication and any precautions and safety guidance, a medication appendix providing more information about the treatment, an emergency contact card, and finally a pregnancy test, but this will only be applicable to those participants with childbearing potential. All participants randomised to the IMP will have a safety call on day 1 and day 2. Day 1 safety calls will only be for participants of childbearing potential, and that's those who are allocated to an antiviral agent with teratogenic potential, and this includes the molnupiravir. The purpose of the call is to confirm receipt of the pack with the pregnancy test and also confirm a negative pregnancy test result. The call will need to be completed by a clinician or research nurse from either the central team or the panoramic hub. Those participants who confirm positive tests will be withdrawn from the trial and asked not to start their antiviral medication. And it's important that the pregnancy test is completed prior to starting the trial medication, and this will all be explained to the patient pre-randomisation. Patients will also be asked to confirm a negative pregnancy test result in their day 1 to 3 daily diaries. All participants randomised to IMP will have a call on day 2, and that's to confirm the receipt of the pack, follow up on any side effects, and confirm follow-up procedures. And this again will need to be completed by a clinician or research nurse. We'll make 3 attempts at phoning the participant, and if we're unable to reach them or their study partner, then we'll contact their GP to request any further information on potential safety events. Obviously, if there's a delay with the pack being sent to the patient, these calls will be rescheduled accordingly. Follow-up for all participants. So between day 1 and 28, participants on all arms of the trial will complete a daily online diary. The central trial team will also call participants or study partners with no internet access, or those who haven't completed their diary for at least 2 consecutive days. We also have a 24-hour safety phone line set up, so participants can speak to a clinical member of the central team if they need to. We'll also be contacting participants at 3 and 6 months from randomisation, and that will be to look at the longer term consequences of their illness. We'll also access their medical records for up to 12 months. Data collection. So all data will be collected electronically using the Spinnaker database. This database has 3 parts. So we have a participant enrolment pages, which is accessed via the PANORAMIC website, and this provides the screening, consent, contact and baseline data. We'll also have participant login pages where they can complete their daily diaries, and also a team page for signed-in users. So there will be a Spinnaker manual to refer to, and there'll also be a training session at some point this week. Early discontinuation and withdrawal of participants. So each participant or their legal representative on the participant's behalf has the right to withdraw from the study at any time. The investigator may also withdraw a participant if they consider them to be ineligible or if they have any safety concerns. And in this instance, the patient may stop taking the study drug but may choose to continue with their online diary or follow-up calls. Participants also have the choice to withdraw from the following. So they can withdraw from the intervention only and can still complete their online diaries or follow-up calls. They can withdraw from calls and contacts and no further contact from the trial team. Or they can withdraw consent to access medical notes and data linkage. And this means that this is a full withdrawal and the study team will not get any further information from data linkages. So participants can also withdraw from the long-term follow-up calls, so are made at 3 and 6 months after the 28-day follow-up. Reasons for withdrawal will be recorded on the CRF if available, and data that's already been collected about the participant will be kept and used. Participants allocated to IMP will be sent a prepaid envelope by the IMP team lead to return their remaining study medication. So we have withdrawal working instructions, so it's important to remember to alert the withdrawal lead of any participants you become aware that they've withdrawn. So moving on to safety reporting. So symptoms, potential medication side effects and serious adverse events will be collected from various different sources, including participant daily diaries, calls to patients or study partners, medical records, notes reviews and NHS digital extracts. For molnupiravir, pregnancy will be reported as an AE of special interest if it occurred within 28 days of the participant starting their first dose of medication. And we'll also report pregnancy if it's discovered after the 28-day time point. SAE reporting, so all-cause hospitalisation and or death is the primary outcome, and this data will be captured in CRFs. SAEs other than hospitalisation or death due to COVID-19 must be reported for all antiviral agents according to the protocol and primary care CTU pharmacovigilance SOP. So adverse event reporting. So participants will be asked to rate the severity of their COVID-19 symptoms, which may also be a possible medication side effect in their daily diary. We'll also have an enhanced safety monitoring committee who will be monitoring any trends and severity of symptoms between the usual care and antiviral reagent arms. We'll ask the participants to report each symptom based on the following definitions. So no problem, mild problem, moderate problem, or major problem, where the symptom causes the patient considerable limitation in activity. Participants are free to withdraw from taking the antiviral at any point if they perceive they have an intolerable AE. They'll be provided with a trial wallet emergency card, which will detail any potential side effects and also have the 24-hour safety contact phone line. This card is also useful as it alerts hospital clinicians about the patient's trial participation. The clinician may also want to follow up with patients directly within 24 hours of becoming aware of an adverse event, and this is so they can advise on any appropriate clinical care. So it's important if a patient does express any safety concerns to you during a call or an email, it's important that you alert the trial manager as soon as possible so the clinical team can then follow up. Serious adverse event reporting. So any event that is considered fatal, life-threatening, requires or prolongs inpatient hospitalisation, is disabling or resulted in a congenital anomaly or birth defect, or any other significant medical event that may jeopardise the participant or require medical or surgical intervention to prevent one of the outcomes listed above. All SAEs for Panoramic Hub participants will need to be reported to the primary care CTU within 24 hours of being notified of an SAE, and the Central Safety Monitoring Team are responsible for reporting of SAEs for all centrally recruited participants. So when an SAE is reported, the relationship of each event to the antiviral agent needs to be determined by a medically qualified individual according to the following definitions. So unrelated is where the event is not considered to be related to the antiviral agent. Possibly related, so although a relationship to the antiviral agent cannot be completely ruled out, the nature of the event or underlying disease may make other explanations possible. Probably related means that the temporal relationship and absence of a more likely explanation suggests that the event could be related to the antiviral agent. And finally, definitely related, where the known effects of the antiviral agent, its therapeutic class, or based on challenge testing, suggests that the antiviral agent is the most likely cause. So follow-up of SAEs. So SAEs that have not resolved by the end of the study will need to be followed up until any of the following occurs. So if the event resolves or stabilizes or returns to how it was at the baseline, or if it can be attributed to agents other than the study intervention or factors unrelated to study conduct, or it becomes unlikely that any additional information can be obtained. The procedure for immediate reporting of serious adverse events. So the trial team or responsible clinician or CI will complete an SAE form directly into the Spinnaker database for all reportable SAEs. The GP practice or trial team will then provide additional information, and if necessary, the participant may be contacted. We have various working instructions for all different procedures as part of the Panoramic trial, and these should be read and understood by all members of the trial team, and we'll also be sending the relevant working instructions to the Panoramic hubs. So we have a call manual, we have working instructions for the day 1 and 2 safety calls for the clinical team, we have a Spinnaker user manual, eligibility review, and instructions for vouchers, invoicing, withdrawals, IMP handling, and safety monitoring. And for a full list of working instructions available, please consult the working instruction log. Finally, looking at risk assessment and monitoring plan. So this will be prepared before the study opens for each antiviral agent and will be reviewed and updated as necessary as the study continues and to reflect any significant changes. Monitoring will be performed by the primary care CTU quality assurance manager or delegate, and the level of monitoring required will be informed by the risk assessment. Monitoring activities will include site setup and green light, recruitment, IMP, in particular accountability at site, and diary completion. Thank you for listening to the training session. There will be a live Q&A session, so if you do have any questions, please enter these in the Excel form that will be sent round shortly.